So this is part of the program, so we'll talk.
Tony,
I say just
run
a
upstairs
number
and
of
get
times
the
when I'm speaking
batteries.
for groups here at the museum, but all that you see, facility-wise, exhibit-wise, or whatever, is all done by volunteers. When we go to funding sources to ask them for financial help, I think one of the largest selling points is that we have no staff. You know, you fill out the grant application forms, they want to know, how many employees do you have? What's your salary expense? I said, we have none. So I'm very proud of my association with the museum. We have such dedicated volunteers who do everything from prepare exhibits, give tours of the houses, do the 5th grade tours every spring to the kids, come and give private tours of the house, bake cookies, bake cakes, run candlelight dinners, raise money for an addition to the museum, prepare new exhibits, and we have a new exhibit coming, by the way. But all of it is done. We're blessed in this community with wonderful nonprofit organizations. Most of them have at least one employee. We have none. It all gets done by volunteers. A number of years ago, I read something. The late Governor George Romney, I think he was from Michigan, I may have said this before. He has, and I'm paraphrasing, he said the most powerful force in existence is a group of volunteers focused on an effort. And here at 124 Granite Street, we have wonderful volunteers focused on preserving, researching the history of both the Babcock and the Smith families here at 124 Granite Street. So that's I'm proud of the Babcock Smith House Museum. Now, as most of you might know, for the last 9 years, we've done an awful lot of research about the Westerly granite industry. You know, there was the newspaper series. It seems so long ago, but 52 weeks, full page in the Westerly Sun, back page of the front section every Monday, thanks to the financial support of United Builders Supply. Then there was the book. Then there was the curriculum guide. Then there was the Carved from Stone DVD. Then there was the addition to the carriage house, and the list goes on and on. By the way, there's another DVD coming, not related to granite. It's about Joshua Babcock and his relationship with Benjamin Franklin. And that's going to be released next year as the 350th anniversary of the founding of the town of Westerly. And so there'll be a lot of special things. The museum, we're going to have the month of March in the Hoxie Gallery at the library for exhibits about the Babcock Smith House. But in all of the granite research that we've done programs on a number of different companies. Okay? We've done the Smith Granite Company. We've done the Sullivan Granite Company. We've done the Joseph Kaduri Granite Company. We've done the Bonner Monument Company. But there's one thing that all of those have in common that differs with Buzzi Memorials. They're not in existence anymore. But Buzzi, for 85 years, is still in existence. And that's what makes this a little bit different. And so I'm going to be talking about the 3 lives of the Buzzi Memorial facility. Let's start with a little background information about the players. Angelo Buzzi, Arzo, Switzerland, 1900. Okay. The northern Italian region trained so many of the great carvers that came to Westerly. And make no mistake, Angelo Buzzi was one of the great carvers that worked here in Westerly. And I'm going to show you one of his cemetery monuments that he did that I'm in awe every time I drive by it. Okay.
He watched his older brothers who were stone cutters. He began cutting stone when he was only 7 years old. And there were different schools that trained these artisans. There was one in Vigu, Switzerland, and this special school was in Zurich. Came to America in 1923. He actually, for a while, lived at 21 Dayton Street in Westerly. I can't remember how I found that out, but I drove by the house, had to look at it, make sure it's still standing, 21 Dayton Street. And then, of course, he set up his shop on the Stonington Road in 1933. But he had done a lot of work before it came to Westerly. A lot of work. Unfortunately, he died very suddenly at age 63 in 1963. So that's a little bit of the, Angelo's history. And here's a shot, an older shot of the shop with a show yard with, the different tablets and markers and so on. And of course, Buzzi didn't have a quarry. My grandfather didn't have a quarry. Smith Granite Company had both a quarry and a cutting shed. Sullivan Granite Company was just a quarry, and they sold their product to a lot of other companies. I know my grandfather purchased huge amounts of stone from Sullivan. Farquharson and Bruiser would purchase from Sullivan, and I'm sure Buzzi probably purchased stone from the Sullivan Granite Company. This is an older picture. I'll show you the picture. There weren't a lot of shots of Angelo to be found, and so I had to crop this, and that's why it's not crystal clear. I had to crop it from another photo. I'll show you that photo in a second. Here's another, he's a little bit older gentleman. Once again, I had to crop it from another picture, and that's why it's not really too clear. This is a shot. This is Angelo. Okay. I don't know who this person is, unfortunately. If anyone knows, please tell me. Okay. This is Frank Maranzoni. This is another one of Westerly's outstanding stone carvers, Joseph Gervasini. He worked for my grandfather. And this is William Bell, who was a draftsman at the Kaduri Granite Company, Phil Gallagher, Tom Gorley, and the rough, scruffy-looking guy on the left is my father, Richard Kaduri. He didn't get the memo. Okay? Jackets and ties, and a hat. The first shot I showed you of Angelo Buzzi. This is where I cropped it from. This was a gathering in New London, Connecticut in 1935. So Angelo had only kind of been here, for a couple of years. This is my grandfather, Joseph Kaduri. This is Constantine Bruiser from the Farquharson and Bruiser Company, which was located, if you head down Oak Street and you pass the United Builders Supply, before you get, and now I'm really sounding like a Westerly native, where Atlantic Lumber used to be, okay? In between, you can see stacks set back from the road. There are racks of lumber from United Builders. That's where Farquharson and Bruiser was. And they closed up shop sometime in the early 1950s. And I just recently found out that my father purchased their stock back in the early 50s. But there were three local granite men. I think these gentlemen are part of the Bottinelli family, which is very prominent in the New London area. So New London, Connecticut, 1935. But there's our star of today, Angelo Buzzi. So Angelo didn't like carving tombstones. Okay? He said it was a sad experience. Okay? It represented someone dying. He liked working on public monuments and memorials. Like he carved, there's 2 eagles in Penn Station carved by Angelo. Okay? And isn't that beautiful? The feathers and so on. Angelo loved this kind of work. Now here's an interesting certificate. He worked on the Equitable Trust building, and I'm assuming that this is a picture of it. And this is before he came to Westerly. This certificate of places his name on the Congress Honor Roll of Craftsmen, October 1927. Okay? He worked in New York City on this building. I'll have to try to get if the one still exists. I don't know if the Equitable Trust building is still. Linda Smith might be able to, Linda Chafee might be able to help me. She did an excellent program on buildings in New York City, constructed of Westerly granite. The building may not be out of Westerly granite, but Angela worked on it. Now here he is working on the Providence War Memorial. Once again, 1929. He hasn't set up his own shop. He was like an independent artisan, traveling from location to location, doing work for government entities. There's another portion of that same, Providence War Memorial. Okay? This is the kind of work that he enjoyed doing. There it is, completed. I think that this is the Rhode Island State House. Okay, right behind. Okay, I'll show you another picture of a monument he worked on, and the State House is in it as well. The Roger Williams Monument, 1938. So he was in town. He was working. But this monument used to have a walkway that you could walk around the front of the monument. But one of the fingers got broken off. And so they then changed their mind. And so when you look at this photograph, which you see it on TV all the time, one of the insurance companies promotes Rhode Island, and they have this shot, and now you can see that there's a gate that you can't get past this point, and they really wanted to make sure you couldn't climb over. Okay, and interesting. Angelo he finished this monument at the Kaduri Granite Company, and I guess there was an underestimation of the size of stone that was needed. And Harold Buzzi told us the story that when they turned the statue over to work on the other side, Angelo said, not enough stone here. And so Roger Williams went on a diet, okay? And so they had to make him a little bit thinner than he actually was. But this is a classic. Next time you see, I can't remember the name of the insurance company, but you'll see it. It's there. Now you can look at this monument from the back. And there's the State House over here. It's up on Prospect Hill. And what I didn't include in this is ground level, but if you were to stand where Roger Williams is standing, you got about a 25-foot straight drop down, and it's all granite. There's the face, and a lot of it, unfortunately, has been vandalized with, spray paint and, so on and so forth. But this was a nice spring day, which shows the back of the monument. But I thought it's kind of neat the way, I didn't realize it at the time. I was just snapping the monument, and then as time went on, I realized. But it overlooks Providence, which is kind of nice. So Angelo worked on the Roger Williams Monument. He worked on the John Erickson Memorial in Washington, D.C. How many of us know who John Erickson was? Don't hear his name much, do you? John Erickson. Well, Angelo worked on this monument. I had to do some research myself. I was a stamp collector, and I remember this stamp in my collection. But he was a naval engineer, and he designed the USS Monitor, okay, from the Civil War. He also created for the Navy what they called the screw propeller, which was a big asset, and he's really, within the Navy, heralded as one of the great, servants to our country's military history. But he got his name, he's got his monument on a stamp, but he's not nearly as well known as a lot of other figures that have done great service to our country. But Angelo Buzzi worked on this public monument. Now here we are at the General Accounting Office in Washington, D.C., and this is one of the panels, and Angelo worked on this. Once again, this is the kind of work that he liked to do. the Veterans Building in Columbia, South Carolina, 1953. I've got 3 or 4 shots of the I think there were 8 to 10 different panels for this in this Veterans Building. But the craftsmanship of all these figures, it's just beautiful. There's another one, and this is what got Angelo excited. Sorry about the glare. I was photographing these pictures out of a scrapbook with my iPhone, and trying to control the flash was a little bit of a challenge at times. Other public monuments. In Washington, he worked on the Library of Congress. He worked on the National Archives. He worked on the Federal Courthouse. In New York City, he worked on Grand Central Station. In addition to, we saw the Eagles from Penn Station. The Museum of Natural History. He worked on the West Virginia Capitol Building, the Massachusetts War Memorial on Mount Greylock, the Boston Courthouse, there's a Moses relief statue, and in the Federal Reserve Building in El Paso, Texas. We think we have a plaster model of part of that Federal Reserve Building, one of the pieces that went on that. And I'll show it to you later. We're trying to find out for sure if... Now, cemetery monuments. Okay. He didn't like doing them. Didn't like doing cemetery monuments. But look at this gem. This is the Nidal Cross in Riverbend Cemetery. It was done in 1939. He worked at Farquelli and Bruiser to do it. If you want to see it up close, go in the main gate. First major left, I think it's Cypress, and go down and it's right there on the right. Now, with a lot of monuments like this, the great carver would not create the entire monument. And so George Stenhouse did some of the preliminary work on shaping the monument. Okay? And maybe he even roughed in the 12 apostles. And maybe he even roughed in the 4 evangelists. Nicholas Virzillo did this scrolling along the side that went up and around. Okay? But up close, these are the 4 evangelists. So you've got the Christ child and its mother and 2 angels, but you've got the 4 evangelists. You've got Matthew, symbolized by the eagle, Mark, symbolized by the winged lion, Luke, symbolized by the winged bull, and John, symbolized by the angel. I thought that was kind of, John, symbol for John is an angel, so I thought that was kind of nice. But the detail, maybe I can stand corrected, but I don't know of anyone that can do this kind of carving anymore. Maybe eventually they'll have computer-generated chisels, but about 7 or 8 years ago I visited what I thought might have been a family relation in Gettysburg, a Corduri, C-O-R-D-O-U-D-U-R-I, monument company. I said, got to be a connection. I was wrong. They were from a region of France. And they had someone there, one of their quote-unquote carvers was working on a polished stone. Well, they were using like a Dremel tool, etching, not carving the stone, but just etching a design on the surface. And we have seen current day work come into Riverbend Cemetery from cutting sheds from other parts of the country, and when you look at the carving, it can't begin to hold a candle to this kind of craftsmanship. So Angelo Buzzi was truly one of the great carvers within Westerly. There were others, Joseph Gervasini, John Milbury, there were many others, Richard Camoli. But Angelo Buzzi really, when you look at this kind of work, was truly remarkable. So let's move on in our hierarchy of Buzzi Memorial. For 50 years, Harold Buzzi, Angelo's son, continued the operation on the Stonington Road. He wasn't a stone cutter, but he excelled at designing monument lettering, layouts, and sandblasting. 50 years he kept that company going. You know, he would bring products. He, as his father did, he would buy stock from other companies, and they would finish the sandblasting at the shop. Remember that sign? I'm going to show it to you later. There's another show demonstrating the kind of slant markers, tablets, flush markers, and so on. Here's Harold. I think he's got a cigar in his mouth. His wife doesn't like the idea that he let them take a picture with a cigar in his mouth. This is the ram that sits out in front of the Memorial Union at the University of Rhode Island. And it had been damaged. I think it had been broken at the legs. And Harold was able to use bronze dowels and so on and kind of restore it. Now this is Harold in more recent years when we were putting together the built from stone, the Wesley granite story. We went over, we talked to Harold, and he was working on a layout. And at the time, he was probably 80 to 82 years of age. And he was working on one of his layouts. And here's another one that he'd already, a slant marker that he'd already, sandblasted. But here he was working on, you put the rubber, okay, over the face of the stone. And then you cut out the letters to expose the stone. That's where so when the sand hits it, okay, it's going to make the lettering and so on. So for 50 years, Harold Buzzi kept Buzzi Memorial in operation. But in 1976, Buzzi Memorials was sold. And Richard Brooks, he's here with us today, and you'll have an opportunity. I'm going to ask him to come up after if you have any questions about. He and I have I've gotten to know Rich pretty well. He's been very helpful in putting together today's program and so on. But he was born in Waterford, Connecticut. So it's kind of like the third rendition of Buzzi Memorial. And from 1999 to 2009, he worked at Camoli Granite Company, learning the stone cutting trade. And then in October of 2016, he purchased Buzzi Memorial from Harold, and he began a restoration of the facility. And today there are 3 employees. I'm going to show you some pictures. He's got an expanded product display area, and he's got an interesting company museum underway. I was just there, let's say Tuesday, taking some additional pictures. This is the new sign. If you remember the old sign for a while, it kind of, between the time frame that Harold wasn't really working and the purchase by Rich, the sign had kind of come off its base and so on and so forth. Had trouble getting some good pictures this winter without snow. Every time I was supposed to go over last Monday. I'd called Rich, I'll be over about 10 o'clock on Monday. What did we get? 4.5 inches in Westerly. And so I had to go over on Tuesday. Most of it had melted by then, but he's got an expanded display yard with a lot more monuments. Some of it, he'll give you more information if he wants to, but importing from Barry, Vermont, some from India. And India is a large exporter of granite these days. But he's got a nice display yard with, you got your slant markers and your flush markers, and you got your tablets and so on. But you can tell there's a rejuvenation taking place at Buzzi Memorial. There's Rich standing out front. I should have had him stand next to the fireman statue next, but he's cleaned up the site. He's cleaned away a lot of the shrubbery. Before, sometimes you had trouble knowing where the office door was because the taxes plant had gotten so large. But I don't know whether did this come from Barry, Rich? It did? Came from Barry. Here's the inside of the shop. So it's an active working shop. There's Rich up close. What I found interesting is the flush marker that had been sandblasted. As you can see, the edge is polished. The rest is a hammered finish, and the sandblasting is that it contains the signature of the deceased. Okay, they replicated it, enlarged it, and had the signature of the deceased on the face of the stone, which is kind of different. I haven't heard of that before. This is one of the sandblasting places. This is where the stone to be sandblasted would be placed. The lights would shine on it, and the sandblast would be on the other side, holding onto this hose with protective goggles and gloves and everything. And the rubber would stop. I can tell you from experience of years as a kid watching them sandblast, it's supposed to stop most of the sand ricocheting off the stone, but it doesn't. That's why they wear the gloves and the heavy apron and so on. I said, Rich, you got to do a little posed picture for me, like cutting the stone. This is eventually going to be a bench, a couple of large pieces.
Does he use gloves?
He probably would use gloves when he's cutting stone, but a little bit of a posed picture for the camera. Now, this is kind of unique. This is in the area that's becoming his new museum. These are the original doors to the cutting shed when Angelo Buzzi opened up shop in 1933. And here's I've turned around, and there's the newer door that existed. But the older doors, and Rich's plan is hopefully to maybe reinstall those original doors out front. And this is an area that he's creating a new museum. And as you can see here, he's even got, this is high tech now. We got the computer on the wall and so on. And this table up close, this is where layout designs would be done, for sandblasting. You've got your different letters of different sizes, 2 inches, 3 inches, smaller, even 1 inch and everything. It would be laid out. Notice that the letters are laid out, in the vise, and it would all be laid out on the paper, and then transfer it onto the rubber that then gets glued to the monument face. This is a pointing machine. Okay, this is what the sculptors would use. They would have the plaster model, and they would put these different points at appropriate locations, okay, to get the reference, the relationship of, let's say, the elbow of an arm and the chin, and then they would take that over, once they have locked the positions, they would take that over to the hunk of granite. Okay, and that would give them the reference point. So, okay, if this is where the elbow's got to be, and this is where the arm and the chin is going to be, I've got to take away a certain amount of stone to get that same relationship. Okay, so this is the plaster model. We don't know for sure. It just doesn't this seem like this belongs in El Paso, Texas? Okay, but Rich spent a lot of time on the computer the other day when I was there trying to find, this image and so on. But this is a plaster model, and it may be the one from the work that Angelo did in El Paso, Texas. But that's in the museum that's being created. Here he's got a nice display of different kinds of granite, okay, and different finishes. You've got, and the sandblasting. Here you got your polished, finished, hammered or sandblasted letters, the B's. So if a customer wants to pick a certain color, a certain type of granite, he has an indication of what it's going to look like either in the hammered finish or in the polished state. So it's a nice feature in the museum area. Here he's got a chain pull that he's painted it up a little bit. I like the yellow hook and everything, just to give people representation of tools and equipment that were there in the Buzzi, operation in the shed in the 85 years since it's been in existence. Now this is one of the original sandblasting panels, and here you have the rubber, and this could be a portable sandblasting machine that they sometimes take into a cemetery. A lot of times when they make up a monument, they'll leave a death date blank, and then they have to go into the cemetery with a portable machine. Or it may have been the machine that was used, with this panel. Here you've got the head and face mask for the sandblaster, and this is where the hose would get stuck through and sandblast the product, which would be on the other side, obviously. And there's that sign that we saw earlier in the display yard. Rich has got it displayed nicely above the panel.
It's interesting, John, that when we were young, West Pawcatuck and Wickedy-Cork had an address of Westerly, Rhode Island, because there was no post office in Pawcatuck.
Yes,
And those of us who grew up in Pawcatuck had a Westerly address.
right. Yeah, I'm glad you noticed that, Meg. Westcon over in Pawcatuck on the White Rock Road, their mailing address used to be Westerly, Rhode Island. And so until the Pawcatuck Post Office opened
Not that long ago.
15, 20 years ago, maybe? So, but yes, a lot of places had Westerly. Okay, and this brings us back to our original shot. So, Rich, why don't you, Rich, you want to come up? Let me introduce you to the current owner. Tony, you can put those lights on if you'd like. This is Rich Brooks. This is the current owner, the person putting a lot of work into continuing the legacy of Buzzi Memorial going forward. And I told him I'd give him an opportunity if he wants to.
So we just, really, the craftsmanship really is important to me. So that way, it was very important to kind of put the museum at the shop with all some of the tools that were still left behind. I noticed the other day I went to a shelf and I had to grab something off of it. Well, we actually still used some of the things that were still there. So I was like, do I leave this on the shelf or? And I was like, we'll keep using it.
Is it on? Let's see.
Feathers and wedges. But yeah, I mean.
Right there. Was it over there?
Yeah, it was in this old oil can.
Yeah. He's got a display of different chisels and.
Yeah. So yeah, we're not completely finished, but it's getting there. It's taking a little longer than I wanted, but we had, we didn't stop the memorial making process. So it's been a lot of fun there. If anybody has any questions?
Still got his truck?
No. It's a popular question, though. There's a famous truck. I've heard a lot of stories about it, but no. I've seen it in action.
It's being restored.
It's
It
being
was
restored.
purchased 2 years ago. I'm Buzzi. Harold is my dad.
So.
The gentleman that worked for my dad, who did work in the cemetery, his son bought it 2 years ago, and it's under restoration. So you always called it the big truck. So yeah, it's still around. I haven't seen it since the day it was sold.
That'll be a nice addition.
Oh.
Any other questions about Buzzi Memorials? No?
What was it like when you were working with who did you?
Oh, Mrs. Molly?
Yes, Mr. Moore.
I chuckled when somebody asked, no gloves. No gloves. And Mr. Kamoli, the first thing he would say is, can I see your hands?
Yeah.
And if you had nice soft hands, he says, you don't work. It was a very good apprenticeship, hard work. Yeah,
You also need all 10 fingers, too.
that tells if somebody's safe.
I remember Dick pointing out one of his fingers, he had built up such a huge callus over the years, which was not unusual.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ike had one on his little finger
Yeah,
because he held the tools.
right. Helen?
What made you decide to go into this? I mean, you were a young man, stonecutters on a dime a dozen. They're not there to model, you know, they don't come to high school to say, would you like to come in and carve? So what made you decide to do that?
I was working at a monument shop in New London, the same one, Bottinelli's, where that photo was
Right,
from.
right.
And when I was younger, I started mowing the lawns there. Then I started helping them set the memorials, and so I kind of grew an interest to it as I was younger and going through school. And then kind of you have that point in your life where you say, you know, what do I want to do, and you can make that change. And I was like, well, let's dig deeper into this, and so I came to Westerly. Yeah.
Meg?
When the museum is done, John, let us know, because that'd be a fun thing for our Babcock Smith crowd to make a trip to South
Yeah.
Carolina.
Rich will have to have a little bit of an open house.
Yes, we'll have to have an open house. It's coming shortly.
Good.
Do you do monuments now?
That's what we do, correct.
Most?
Yes, that's most of what we do. Now, like the civic memorials and public stuff, architects and engineers, they kind of hit that head on, and they'll go and they'll use like local people. They farm it to the bigger corporations. So we don't get involved in too much. It's when they need some addition work to it, lettering, things like that. They'll call us in, but our main focus is monuments, correct?
What work are you especially proud of?
I give them all like my 100% attention. So I don't remember them like as names. They're like, oh, the one with the sailboat, or the one, you know, they'll have, each one has meaning to me, like the golf bag stone, the, you know, baseball stone. But like by names, I don't remember them. They're just letters, so I keep them straight.
The piétard that you have there in the front of the display area, is that something that was done elsewhere?
That was done in Barry. Yeah. So yeah, most of the sculpting, like sculpting is a specific trade in itself. So that around here in Barry is what, you know, in Barry and in Georgia is where they're mostly, and then unless it's imported, some are imported as well. But yeah, the muscle tones and things like that is a little finer training than I have.
What's going to happen to the firemen? It's so unusual.
Well, I knew I needed something interesting to draw attention.
Okay.
That we were open again. So I had the opportunity for the firemen and the pieta. So I took advantage of that. Right. So the fireman, he's expensive, and so like yeah, when a fire company wants to do something, they usually in their budget is not going to be to put a statue in front of the firehouse. They might want to buy equipment. So, but I think it does need a good home. So my thoughts are, in due time, maybe working with the fire company down the street and maybe having them have like a fireman's day, and maybe they can auction it or raffle it off, just to do like a raffle. So that way somebody will be able to afford it, and it will be in a deserving home. So in due time.
Who did the carving on that?
It was done in Barry and not specific names. There's actually only like 6 or 7 sculptors, and they freelance. So even if somebody said it was like at Rock of Ages, they usually have one of the sculptors there at all times, but they're not really employed. They freelance around.
Not unlike what happened with Angelo working at different companies. It wasn't where the work was there, you know, the great carvers would travel.
Yeah.
They were considered artists.
That's right.
Do you have children following in your footsteps?
I have two lovely daughters in the back. They have a little ways to go. But they love coming to the shop. Yeah.
John, could we recognize the other members of the Buzzi family that are here as well?
Suzanne,
Hi.
Harold's daughter.
There's a crew over somewhere else.
Are there others that,
Well, this is family on my dad, Angelo's side, my cousin Christine and kids.
glad to have you here. Thank you, Rick.
Thank you.
Yes.
I got a question. You kept saying that Angelo didn't like doing cemetery work, and I'm just interested in how you know that.
Harold told us.
And something, I don't know, I guess my dad didn't tell you, when my grandfather was doing the Eagles on Penn Station.
Penn Station?
And the work at Grand Central, he would sing in Italian so that it would draw attention for people walking on 42nd Street, you know,
Right.
to look.
To look up. Right. It's a good story.
That probably does it,
Yeah.
He didn't do that in the shop somewhere? He did that on the carving?
Oh, that was, yeah, out there, yeah, on site.
All done by him, no machines. Amazing.
Thank you for coming and enjoy the exhibits.